Today, Election Yard is going to look at the 2026 U.S. Senate races, but what we're going to do for these Senate races is out of the 35 of them, we have them ranked based on their danger of flipping. So if we have the Senate race that we're going to talk about first, at number 35, we have evaluated that as the least likely Senate seat to flip out of all of them. But if we have it at number 1, we think it's the most likely to flip. And, also too, just because we have a seat at number 1 doesn't mean it's going to flip, because anything can happen in these Senate races. We recorded this in late January 2026. Anything can still happen with these races. It's just the one that we think is most likely to flip as of today. So, like I said, there are 35 Senate races in the U.S. this year. 33 of them are regularly scheduled elections, and 2 of them in Ohio and Florida, they are special elections. So what else is there to do but to start looking at these Senate races? Now, the Republicans are in the Senate majority right now, 53-47. You look right now, 22 of the 35 Senate races that are up for election this year are Republican seats. Only 13 of them are Democratic. So you might be looking at this and saying, hey, Election Yard, I keep hearing that it's going to be a struggle for the Democrats to flip the Senate this year. How could that possibly be when the Republicans are on defense in far more seats? Well, as we start to get through the seats that are up for election this year, it will probably start to become clear to you why this is going to be a tough map for Democrats. Not impossible, but tough. So let's get into it. Let's start number 35. This is West Virginia. Shelley Moore Capito is the senator in West Virginia. She's been in the Senate for quite a while now. West Virginia is a state that has done a political 180 over the last 25 or 30 years. Used to be a lot of conservative Democrats living in that state. It used to be reliably blue. Around the time of George W. Bush, that all started to change. Now everyone in West Virginia and their cousin is a Republican, and that's how they vote. West Virginia, this Senate seat is a very, 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 very low risk of flipping. I don't even think if Joe Manchin became a Democrat again tomorrow, was 20 years younger and ran for this seat, I don't even think he'd win it. So the Republicans are fine there, just like they are also fine in Wyoming at number 34. This is Cynthia Lummis's seat, but Lummis is not going to run for re-election this year. Lummis has decided to hang him up. The Republican at-large Congresswoman Harriet Hagman, she is going to run for this seat. She will almost certainly win it. The Democrats have essentially nobody to run for them in this state, at least nobody with any statewide recognition. So the Republicans will hold serve here, just as the Republicans will hold serve in South Dakota. This is number 33 on the list. Mike Rounds, a senator. He's a former governor. Republicans do not tend to lose in this state, at least not anymore. Now, I'm not going to age myself, but some of you out there might be old enough to remember when South Dakota, in this century, had 2 Democratic senators. They had Tom Daschle and Tim Johnson. Of course, Tom Daschle losing, and then once Tim Johnson was gone, that seat went Republican right away. And Mike Rounds is one of the Republican senators from this state. He's actually the junior senator because you've got John Thune, who's the Senate Majority Leader. He's been around for quite a while now. The Republicans are going to be fine here. And the Democrats are going to be fine in Rhode Island. This is number 32. So Jack Reed has been in the Senate. I believe he was first elected in 1996. He is the senior senator for Rhode Island. He is not going to have any trouble winning this seat. The Republicans really don't have anybody of consequence to run for them in the state at this point, at least nobody that has proven that they can win. And Jack Reed has been a political institution in Rhode Island for decades, so he'll be fine. In Massachusetts, that is number 31. This is Senator Ed Markey. He is running for re-election. So there was a thought that maybe Ed Markey was going to get primaried by somebody like Ayanna Pressley. She's a congresswoman from Boston. Pressley decided not to primary Markey, and once that happened, Markey's path to re-election became much, much clearer, because in Massachusetts, the way to win a Senate race is usually by winning the Democratic primary. Of course, we all remember Scott Brown in 2010. That was a special set of circumstances. Scott Brown was a likable, presented as a relatively moderate candidate. Martha Coakley, as I have said on this YouTube channel before, and I will say again, she was the Democrat who ran. She ran one of the worst, if not the worst, statewide political campaign that I've ever seen in the United States. And the tide was starting to turn towards the Republicans. Of course, later that year in 2010, the Republicans would win big in the House. That was the Tea Party wave year. And Massachusetts was kind of the tip of the spear of that. But now fast forward 16 years, the Democrats are very much in control of the 2 Senate seats in Massachusetts, so it ain't going to happen for them. At number 30, this is Idaho. Jim Risch is the Republican running for re-election. It's almost not even worth talking about this race. The odds of a Democrat getting elected statewide in Idaho is basically the same odds as you pull in a $200,000 jackpot on a slot machine. It just ain't going to happen. And then number 29, this is Arkansas. Another very, very safe Republican seat. Tom Cotton running for re-election. Really doesn't matter who the Democrats nominate. Arkansas used to be a Democratic state, kind of in the same line as West Virginia, where, conservative or moderate Democrats used to be able to get elected. In Arkansas, ain't going to happen anymore. So that's pretty much written off. As is Oklahoma, number 28. This is a Republican seat, as you might expect. Mark Wayne Mullen is the incumbent running for re-election. If you want to know who the Democrats are going to run, I don't know. And really, at this point, it doesn't matter. The Republicans will win Oklahoma. And now moving on to number 27. This is Tennessee. The Republican here is Bill Haggerty. He will be running for re-election. The Democrats don't really have many candidates with any notoriety in the state. Of course, we mentioned in the gubernatorial video, Afton Bain, who ran in that special election. She did lose that special election for the U.S. House, but she definitely built up her brand. However, she is running for re-election to the State House of Representatives. So with that said, not a whole lot of people of name that are running for the Democrats here, and even if they were, you look at 2018 when Marsha Blackburn had to run against Phil Bredesen, who was a former Democratic governor, a popular former Democratic governor, and even he couldn't really do anything in a Democratic year. So I do think 2026 is going to be a more Democratic year, but it's probably going to be safe for the GOP here. Kind of like number 26, Mississippi, Cindy Hyde-Smith running for re-election as far as we know. Mississippi does have some Democratic areas. If you look at a map of Mississippi, like for example along the Delta and then in the Jackson area, there are definitely some heavily Democratic pockets of Mississippi. The problem for the Democrats is that the Republican pockets are bigger and they've got more people. So Mississippi will just continue to vote Republican. And then moving on to number 25, this is Kentucky. You might think this would be an interesting race. It will probably be interesting in as far as the primaries go. The general election, probably not so much. So Mitch McConnell, after over 40 years, I almost said over 30 years. It is over 30 years because it's over 40 years in the Senate. Of course, a former Senate Majority Leader. He is finally hanging him up. The Republicans should hold this seat. Now, both sides actually have competitive primaries. In Kentucky, you've got Andy Barr. He's a congressman. He's running. Daniel Cameron, he was the attorney general who ran for governor against Andy Beshear in 2023 and lost. They're two of the more prominent Republican candidates. And then on the Democratic side, you have Charles Booker, you have Amy McGrath, of course, who have both run for office in Kentucky in the past. So I think the primaries will be interesting to watch. But then when you get to the general election campaign, it would really take some sort of Herculean effort for the Democrats to get over the hump here. There have been elections where you might think it was possible, but then it doesn't happen. Andy Beshear would probably be the only Democrat of any consequence, and frankly, I think he might run for president. So that probably will not happen for the GOP. But now you see we're down to number 25 already. We've talked about a lot of Republican seats in here. You can probably already start to tell why this is going to be a difficult map for the Democrats because they ain't flipping West Virginia. They ain't flipping Wyoming. They ain't flipping Idaho. They ain't flipping South Dakota. So even though Republicans are on defense in more seats, a lot of them are very, very red states. So let's just move on now to number 24. This is Oregon. This is Jeff Merkley, the Democratic senator running for re-election. So Merkley got elected to the Senate in 2008. He unseated the last Republican to be elected to the U.S. Senate from Oregon. His name was Gordon Smith. And Merkley's just kind of been coasting along ever since. Oregon is a fairly blue state. It might not be the bluest state in the country, but it's, I would say, consistently blue. Not overwhelmingly blue, but consistently blue. So I wouldn't think that Jeff Merkley will have any trouble here. Now, Louisiana at number 23, it's only interesting in as far as there's going to be a primary challenge. Now, keep in mind, Louisiana, what they do is they got a jungle primary that happens. And if you get 50% plus one against all other candidates, whether Republican, Democrat, Independent, Constitution Party, Monster Raving Loony Party, whatever. They all run in the same jungle primary on election day. And if you get a majority of the vote, you win. Now, Bill Cassidy did that 6 years ago. Probably not going to happen this time because he is not in great with Donald Trump. Donald Trump endorsed Congresswoman Julia Letlow to run against him, and she is running against him. So the Republican vote is going to split. There will probably be a Democrat that gets at least 35% of the vote or so. So the probability of this going to a runoff is high. It's just a question of which Republican is in that runoff, whether it's Cassidy or Letlow, or, there could also theoretically be another candidate that emerges. Probably not. So whatever Republican gets to that runoff against generic Democrat is probably going to win, but it is going to be somewhat interesting because you could see an incumbent senator get unseated here, but not necessarily a flip of partisan control. Number 22 is Alabama. This is an open seat. Tommy Tuberville is now running for governor. So the seat is open. You've got Barry Moore. He's a congressman. He is running for this seat. In terms of the Democrats that are running, there really are no big names in this race. Really, the only statewide big name that the Democrats still have in Alabama at this point is former Senator Doug Jones, and he is running against Tommy Tuberville in the governor's race. So the Senate seat is probably going to be free and clear for the GOP, but it is an open seat, so we have it maybe a little further down the list than otherwise we would have. At number 21 is Kansas. Roger Marshall, the Republican, is running for re-election, and Kansas is a pretty red state. It's further down the list than some of the other states we talked about, like West Virginia or Wyoming, because Kansas is a reliably red state, a consistently red state, as it were, but probably a little less so than West Virginia or Wyoming. Kansas does occasionally elect Democrats. They have a Democratic governor right now. But in terms of the Senate race, this is the state that had Bob Dole in the Senate forever. They're not going to elect a Democrat to the Senate anytime soon, I don't think. If Laura Kelly had run, it would have been more interesting. But I think it would have been a situation kind of like when Larry Hogan, the Republican in Maryland, he was the governor of Maryland, he ran for Senate. It's just too blue of a state, Maryland, so Angela also Brooks won. I think it would be the same in this case if Laura Kelly were running. It's just too red of a state, but it would be more interesting. It would be further down this list. But Laura Kelly isn't running, so the Republicans should be okay here. And then we get to number 20. This is Delaware, Chris Coons. Delaware is a pretty Democratic state. Now, Delaware, it's very interesting. It is a state that if you drive through it for 20 minutes, you'll probably pay $10 in tolls, whether you're going across it or up and down on Route 1. Delaware, the further north you go, the more Democratic it gets. So you're sitting in Sussex County, you're doing Bethany Beach, you're doing Rehoboth Beach. Pretty red county. Then you're up in Kent County where Dover is. It's kind of in the middle. And then you get to Newcastle County where Wilmington is, and that's where the most people are. And it's very blue. So Delaware is a blue state. Chris Coons shouldn't have a whole lot of trouble winning. Delaware does some funky things every now and then, but I don't really see it happening here, especially not in a Democratic year like I think this one will be. At number 19, this is Montana. Steve Daines is the Republican. So now, do I really think Montana is going to be in play? No. I think the only Democrat who would have really made this race interesting would have been Jon Tester, who, of course, in 2024 lost re-election in a strongly fought race. He had been the senator in Montana for quite a while. Steve Daines has been around for a bit himself now. Jon Tester's not running, so Steve Daines should be fine, although Montana does occasionally also elect Democrats in various capacities. It's a redder state than it used to be. So the possibility used to exist that this would have competitive Senate races, not really anymore. But I think 19 is probably about right. But even at that, don't get too hung up on the number of the ranking, because I really don't think at the end of the day that Montana is going to flip. Nor do I think the seat at number 18 is going to flip. This is New Jersey. Democratic seat, Cory Booker, running for re-election. Republicans have had some interesting races for Senate in New Jersey. Unfortunately for the Republicans this time, they don't have Bob Menendez to pick on. He is gone. The Democrats won his seat back after he flipped to independent. Cory Booker really shouldn't have much of any trouble here at all. The Republicans really thought in the 2025 governor's race that they were going to do well here with Jack Ciarelli. And then the election came, and I think it was kind of a wake-up call for Republicans that you're not as close in New Jersey as you think you are. And even at that, I think Cory Booker has built up enough recognition that he should get reelected without too much of a problem unless something unforeseen should arise. At number 17, it's the Commonwealth of Virginia. This is Senator Mark Warner. Of course, Warner's been in the Senate for a while now. He's also a former governor of Virginia. The rumor is that this might be Mark Warner's last go. So when you look at this Senate race in 2032, it might be more interesting because I would imagine there will be a slew of Democrats that want to try to win it. But as for now, I think Mark Warner is in pretty good. The Republicans don't have a whole hell of a lot of people. And frankly, the Republican Party at this point is still licking their wounds in Virginia from what happened across the Commonwealth in November, which is to say they got absolutely clubbed. The Republicans are in bad shape in Virginia right now. With that said, if Glenn Youngkin had run against Mark Warner, maybe this would have been more interesting. I still think Warner probably would have won at the end of the day. But Youngkin isn't running for this seat, and it really doesn't matter who the Republicans nominate. They probably aren't going to win. Now moving up to number 16, this is Colorado. John Hickenlooper running for re-election. Hickenlooper has been around in Colorado politics for a long time. He is, of course, now a U.S. Senator. He is a former governor. He is a former mayor of Denver. So he is very much a known quantity in Colorado. Republicans have not had a whole lot of success in Colorado. There are definitely parts of Colorado where the Republicans do well, but statewide as a whole, not recently. So I would think that Hickenlooper is good to go in this race. And mind you, we're at number 16 now, and I still consider these people running for re-election to be fairly safe. So you can kind of get the sense that there aren't truly a lot of Senate races in play. It's really not until we start getting closer to the single digits that you're going to start to see races that actually might be competitive. Because I certainly don't think number 15 will be. This is Illinois. Now, it's an interesting opportunity for people running for Senate because Dick Durbin, who's been in the Senate for 30 years, former Senate Majority Whip, Minority Whip, been in the Democratic leadership of the Senate for a long time. He is not running for re-election, so there's a competitive Democratic field to try to replace him. For example, Robin Kelly, a congresswoman, she is running. Raja Krishnamurthy, he is a Democratic congressman. He is running. J.B. Pritzker, the governor, he is running for re-election, so he is not running for this seat. I will also mention the lieutenant governor, Juliana Stratton. She is running in this seat. So there's quite the field. The Republican field, I look down the list. Nobody really grabs me. You've got Don Tracy. He is the former chair of the Republican Party. In Illinois, he might get through the primary, but I think the real race here is probably going to be in the Democratic primary. And whomever emerges from that Democratic primary is going to have a significant advantage towards winning the election. At number 14, this is New Mexico, Ben Ray Lujan running for re-election. Now, Ben Ray Lujan in New Mexico, which is I wouldn't say a reliable blue state. It's definitely bluer than it isn't. New Mexico has had Republican senators in my lifetime. Again, not going to age myself, but I seem to remember Pete Domenici, the Republican, being a senator here for a long time. And I also seem to remember Gary Johnson being a Republican governor here and Susana Martinez being a Republican governor here. So Republicans are capable of winning statewide elections in New Mexico. I just don't really think they're going to win this one. So Ben Ray Lujan should be fine here. Now we get to number 13. This is Florida. This is one of the two special elections this year. Ashley Moody is the Republican who was appointed to replace Marco Rubio after he became Secretary of State. So Florida, I might have had higher. In fact, in earlier editions of the list when I was putting it together, I did have Florida a little further up the list, but as things started to become clear, I'm like, okay, the Democrats really don't have a notable candidate here. The Democratic Party in Florida is in shambles. They're probably just looking for something to cling on to at this point, and maybe they'll find some level of it in the governor's race or at the state legislative level. I don't necessarily think they're going to find it in this Senate race, but theoretically, Florida should be more competitive than it actually is, but I can't really justify putting it any higher than 13th at this point. Now at number 12, we have South Carolina. Now you might be thinking, hey, election yard, South Carolina is a red state. Why the hell is it at number 12? Well, it's not that I think South Carolina is necessarily going to flip, but there are a few factors here that I think justified it being a little bit higher up the list in terms of danger of flipping. Lindsey Graham is not entirely popular in South Carolina. Lindsey Graham, in his last Senate race in 2020, a presidential election year, he only won by 10 points, which is a solid margin, but it's not a blowout margin. It's certainly not the kind of blowout margin you would see in West Virginia, Wyoming, Idaho, or states like that. And 3, South Carolina actually does have some Democratic pockets, like the Charleston area, like right in Charleston. That's a Democratic area, and then you've got the Columbia area, that's Democratic as well. And then you've got some other parts of the low country that tend to vote Democrat. They are definitely outnumbered by Republican parts of the state. Democrats, they don't do well at the statewide level, but at the same time, there are some factors here that maybe the race could be interesting, just not close enough to where we think it might flip. Now at number 11, I think things start to get a little bit more interesting once we get here. Number 11 is Nebraska. This is Pete Ricketts. He is running for re-election. Ricketts was a former governor, was appointed to the Senate. He is not running against a Democrat. He is running against an independent. And for those who are politically plugged in, especially in Nebraska, you will probably recognize the name Dan Osborne. Osborne ran as an independent against Deb Fischer in 2024 in what turned out to be a pretty good Republican year, and he kept it reasonably close. Now, Deb Fischer was also in the middle of violating her own term limits pledge. Nebraskans that wouldn't vote for a Democrat, some of them were definitely willing to vote for Dan Osborne. So he is running in this seat. At the end of the day, it might be too tall of an order, but if it's gonna happen in what I think might be a Democratic year and a year where in Nebraska, I do think the Democrats should be favored to flip the 2nd district with Don Bacon getting out of the way. If it's ever going to happen, it probably happens this year. But even at that, I do think it's still going to be a tall order for Osborne. Osborne, definitely running as an independent, will have the backing of the Democrats who are not running a candidate. But we've seen independents run for Senate in the past in Nebraska, in Kansas, and they do tend to come up short. That probably will be what happens here, but I am not willing to completely discount the possibility that Osborne could make this an interesting race. Now at number 10, we have Minnesota. This is an open seat. Tina Smith, the Democrat, is not running for re-election. So there are a couple of named Democrats that are running in this race. Angie Craig, Democratic Congresswoman, she is running. Peggy Flanagan, the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, she is also running. So the Republican primary list, there are definitely candidates. It will be a competitive primary. Definitely nobody with the stature of the candidates that I just mentioned, which is to say people in elected office, people who have served in statewide office or have been elected to Congress. So the thing that you got to keep in mind with Minnesota as well, there's been a lot going on in Minnesota recently. There's been a lot of unrest. There's been a lot of turmoil. You do have to wonder, outside of the human element, you do have to wonder how this is going to change things politically in Minnesota. Is there going to be backlash? Is there not going to be backlash? It's still too soon to say what's going to happen there. But based on the things that have been happening in the news recently in Minnesota, I do think the Democrats are going to probably be more motivated to vote than they otherwise would have been. But again, we're recording this in January 2026. Still too early to say. But I do think the winner of the Democratic primary in Minnesota is going to have the edge. Now at number 9, we move down to Texas. And Texas is actually an interesting race. Am I willing to certify today that I think it's going to flip? No. Do I think it has the potential to be interesting? Yes. And that interesting quality to the Texas Senate race starts right here in the primary. Now you've got Senator John Cornyn running for re-election. He has been in the Senate for a long time. I want to say he was first elected in 2002. So this would be him running for a 5th term. He is getting primaried from his right by Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas. And then on the Democratic side, you actually have a very interesting competitive Democratic primary there. You've got James Tallarico, who is a state representative and who has been recently getting more national recognition. And then you've also got Jasmine Crockett. She is a Democratic Congresswoman who definitely has been getting more national recognition. So you've got interesting primaries on both sides. And what happens in both of those primaries is going to be very important to telling the story of this Senate race. Now, I think actually the outcome of the Republican primary is more essential here because there has been evidence through opinion polling which would suggest that John Cornyn, if he wins the Republican primary, would have a better chance of holding the seat. If Ken Paxton wins, he would probably still be favored, but certainly not by as much as Cornyn would. So it's going to be very, very interesting. We will see how it goes. And I would say to definitely keep an eye on the Senate race. Texas, as I said in the gubernatorial video, has been very much a white whale for the Democrats. They keep chasing it and they don't get it. It's like Lucy, Charlie Brown in the football. They keep getting disappointed there, but I do think this race has the potential to be interesting. Now at number 8, we have Iowa. Joni Ernst is not running for re-election. In earlier editions of the list, I had this one further up. The Democrats have a couple of candidates running like Zach Walz, Josh Turk. There are more Democrats running, and I think they're happy with the candidates they have running. Furthermore, there do seem to be some rumblings going on in Iowa. We have seen at the micro level since last year in state legislative special elections, whether for the Senate or for the House. There have been some heavy swings to the Democrats. That does not mean Iowa is going to flip. And I do think the Republicans recruited well here, getting Congresswoman Ashley Hinson to run in this seat. She should be considered the favorite. Like I said, originally I had this a little further up the list, but I do think Hinson should be considered the favorite. I don't think the Democrats are going to write this race off, but I also think this is one, if the Democrats want to win the Senate, they probably got to find a way to win this one. So keep an eye on it, but I have it a little further down the list than I did originally. At number 7, we have Ohio. This is the second special election that's going on this year. John Husted was appointed to the Senate to replace J.D. Vance. So he is running for the remainder of the term here. And he is running against Sherrod Brown, the former Democratic senator who lost to Bernie Moreno in 2024. Sherrod Brown had been around in Ohio elected politics for decades. So he was certainly a well-known quantity in Ohio. He is running again in 2026. I do think he'll give Husted a run. I don't even know that the fact that this is probably going to be a Democratic year, I don't know that that's going to help put him over the hump. But I also know for damn sure that there is no other Democrat in the state of Ohio that would have anywhere near the shot at flipping the seat as Sherrod Brown would have. So keep an eye on that one. If the Democrats really are serious about flipping the Senate, then they probably got to find a way to make this work. But Ohio has gotten a lot redder in the last decade, so an uphill battle to be sure. At number 6, we have New Hampshire. So this is an open seat. Jeanne Shaheen is the Democrat. She is not running for re-election. She, of course, a former governor. She's been around for decades in elected office in New Hampshire. She's retiring after this year. So the Republicans actually have a competitive primary. They have Scott Brown, the former Massachusetts senator who we mentioned a little earlier in the video. He's running again here in New Hampshire. He did run against Shaheen in a previous election and lost. You also have John Sununu, who used to represent New Hampshire in the U.S. Senate. He's also got the last name Sununu, which does still, as you may remember from the previous governor, that name still does carry a lot of weight in New Hampshire politics. So that'll be an interesting primary. The Democrats likely to nominate Chris Pappas, the congressman from the 1st District of New Hampshire. He will probably be the favorite. New Hampshire, I think, overall is still more Democratic than it isn't. New Hampshire, I also think, is very capable of splitting its tickets. Like, for example, Kamala Harris winning New Hampshire while Kelly Ayotte was winning the governor's race and while the Democrats were winning the 2 House races. I don't think it would necessarily be a stretch to think that Kelly Ayotte could win and Chris Pappas can win. So I do think Pappas is a mild to maybe a little bit more moderate favorite, but I do think that he's going to have to work for this one, especially if somebody like Sununu wins, a former senator with that last name. I do think he will make it competitive. Now, number 5 is real interesting. Now, it's Alaska. Dan Sullivan, Republican, running for re-election. If Mary Peltola, the Democratic former congresswoman, had not run for this seat, this would have been much further down the list. This would have been in the 20s somewhere. Mary Peltola has this all the way up to number 5. And there have been polls that suggest that she's running neck and neck with Sullivan. And I do think that, barring the unforeseen, she will run neck and neck with Sullivan in what is ordinarily a Republican state. But keep in mind with Alaska, as I mentioned in the gubernatorial video, Alaska is liable to just do whatever the hell it wants to do politically. Political party affiliations do blur in some cases, and you've got Republicans and Democrats and alliances, and this faction doesn't like that faction. So there is some element of that. Mary Peltola's coalition may traverse several different political groups in Alaska, and I do think the fact that she has one statewide elected office within the last few years, I think she is definitely the star candidate in this race, and I think she has the ability to make it close. Do I know if she's going to flip it? I don't know if she's going to flip it, but do I think she has a chance of flipping it? Yes, I actually do. At number 4, this is a Democratic seat in Michigan. Gary Peters is the Democratic incumbent. He is not running for re-election. Expect a competitive race here. I did actually have this a little further up, closer to the top of the list in earlier editions. I did move it back to number 4. And part of the reason is, looking at the list of Democratic candidates here, I think the Democrats have a stronger crop here. two of the names off the top of my head. You've got Mallory McMorrow, who is a state senator who actually has gotten some national recognition in recent years. You've also got Haley Stevens, who is a congresswoman. There are other Democrats in the running here. The Republicans most likely going to go with Mike Rogers. He ran and lost against Alyssa Slotkin in 2024. Now, Michigan should be high up this list because Michigan did vote for Trump. Michigan does elect Republicans to statewide office. Michigan, probably a tinge bluer than it isn't, but Republicans are capable of, at the very least, running very, very close races in Michigan, as we've seen. Now, it will be probably a more Democratic year in 2026. And like I said, I do think the Democrats have the stronger field on their side. So maybe this is a tilt Democratic, but I do think it's going to be close. At number 3, we go to Maine. This is Susan Collins. She has been in the Senate since 1996. Democrats thought they had her in 2020 when they ran Sarah Gideon. They did not win that race. And now you've got a real interesting Democratic primary, and it's very much a choose your adventure thing for the Democrats there. But one thing I do know is that the Democrats very much want to beat Susan Collins. They think that this is their time. And I will also say that at Susan Collins' age and how long she's been in the Senate, if they don't beat her this time, they probably never will. Now, on the one hand, on the Democratic side, you have Janet Mills. She is the incumbent governor of Maine. She is leaving office. She's term limited out. Mills is in her late 70s, and she has said in interviews that she might only be willing to serve one term. So that is a factor. And then on the other side, you have Graham Plattner. He's a younger guy. He is an oysterman, very much a blue-collar guy, just getting into electoral politics, has been an outspoken progressive, has gotten into some hot water with a tattoo controversy, and definitely presents in a very, very different way to Janet Mills. So I don't know which way the Democrats are going to go in this race, but I do know that they're going to come for Susan Collins with everything they got. Susan Collins' popularity in the state has definitely taken a hit, especially since Donald Trump came back into office. And Maine does have some parts that do like Donald Trump quite a bit. The 2nd District, which has a lot of northern Maine in it, has voted for Donald Trump 3 times. But the 1st District, you're talking about places like Portland, Ogunquit, Kittery, York. They don't quite like Donald Trump as much. So being perceived as close to Trump is still more of a liability than it isn't in Maine. And Susan Collins has tried to stake out a position as being moderate and independent. Her luck might run out this time as that goes, but there is still a lot to be determined in the primary to see who is running against her. Now at number 2, we have Georgia. My first run of this list, I actually had Georgia at number 1. I moved them down to number 2. I think that there is definitely a chance that this seat flips. I just happen to think that there's a chance that the new number 1 will flip. I do think that there is a higher chance that that seat will flip than this one. This is Jon Ossoff. He is running for re-election. So the Democrats are going to put a lot into holding on to this seat. The Republicans do have some congressmen running for this seat. They do have some, I would call, fairly heavy hitters running. Brian Kemp, the outgoing governor, is not one of them. But I do think the Republicans are going to put a lot of effort into trying to flip this seat. Georgia has been getting cozier with Democrats at the statewide level in recent years. Joe Biden won. The Republicans lost both Senate seats in the same runoff on the same night. So Democrats have had some success in Georgia. I'm not 100% sure that Jon Ossoff is okay. I think he's going to have to work very hard to get reelected. I do think he can win, but it's going to be a tough race. But then the seat at number 1, this is North Carolina. This is the seat that we think is at the highest risk of flipping in 2026 as of the time we recorded this video. Tom Tillis, the Republican senator, is not running for re-election. Tillis, of course, beat Kay Hagan back in 2014, which was a very good Republican year. It's been Republican ever since. Now, Tom Tillis had a close call in 2020 against Cal Cunningham. Cal Cunningham might have actually beat him in that race, but in October, surprise, sunk his campaign. Tillis is getting out, and former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper is getting in. Roy Cooper is probably the best Democratic recruit for the Senate anywhere in the United States. I think the Republicans will put a lot into trying to hold the seat. They will most likely nominate Michael Whatley. He's the former head of the Republican Party in North Carolina. I do think they will keep it close, but I think this is Cooper's race to lose. And I will go further as to say that if Cooper does not win this race and does not flip this seat to the Democrats, then there is not a Democrat alive in North Carolina that would have flipped it. Roy Cooper is the best candidate they could have possibly fielded, and I think he has a lot of advantages here. I actually had this race at number 2 in my first run of this list, and then I was thinking about it. I'm just like, no, this should be number 1, because I actually do think Cooper is the favorite here. Whereas you could definitely make the case that Ossoff is the favorite, if not a slight favorite in Georgia. I actually do think Cooper is the favorite in North Carolina, even if only slightly. So if the Democrats don't win this seat, then they have very, very little hope of flipping the Senate, but I do know that this is a must-win for them in their race for the Senate, and that was 35 Senate races ranked in danger of flipping. And we're going to track these Senate races throughout the year. At Election Yard, like and subscribe. Follow us on social media. We'll see you soon.